Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Suspect descriptions and an escape route.
It's believed that the suspects may have had a vehicle waiting for them.
More details on the high-profile deadly shooting outside a Surrey Gurdwara. Plus, plenty of BC players with an eye on the World Cup. How Canada's women's soccer team is preparing for victory. And no more spending slowdown. Canada's retail sales bump up despite higher prices and warnings about debt loads.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. 2 people are dead and another 2 are hurt after a plane crash yesterday on Vancouver Island's rugged west coast. A float plane was on its way to Tofino but crashed near the remote village of Tassis. Reporter Emily Vance is live in Tofino and joins us now. Emily, what have you learned about this deadly crash?
Anita, we know that the plane was on its way from Masset on the north end of Haida Gwaii here to Tofino. RCMP say 4 people were on board the single-engine plane when it went down. It flew about 600 kilometers before crashing near Tassis, a small community on the northwest coast of Vancouver Island, around 2 p.m. on Tuesday. Coast Guard crews and Mounties responded. Police confirmed 2 people on board were killed. 2 others were flown by helicopter to Comox and taken to hospital. The crash also sparked a fire about half a hectare in size. BC wildfire crews responded, and the blaze is now under control. People from the village of Tassis saw smoke rising from a hillside down the Tassis Inlet.
It's a forested area and it is fairly rugged. The mountain sort of goes from sea level up to about 1,000 meters in that area. I'm not sure the exact elevation that it crashed at, but I don't think it was too high up, but it was where it hit a roadless area.
Okay, so Emily, what do we know about the investigation going forward?
The Transportation Safety Board has confirmed they are investigating. They've deployed a team of investigators to the crash. They're working with the RCMP as well as the BC Coroner's Service. Mounties do believe that weather conditions may have been a factor, Anita.
Emily Vance reporting tonight from Tofino. Thank you. Homicide investigators have shared new details of the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. The president of Surrey's Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara was shot and killed in the building's parking lot Sunday night. As our Leanne Young reports, investigators are looking for 2 suspects.
Days after his death spurred headlines around the world, police are releasing key information around the investigation into the murder of 45-year-old Hardeep Singh Nijjar. They believe they've charted the getaway course for the suspects, and they are describing the pair as heavier-set males wearing face coverings. The shooting happened at the end of the driveway of the Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara around 8:30 p.m. Sunday. Officers believe the suspects then took off on foot along 122nd Street through Cougar Creek Park to 121 Street, where a getaway vehicle was waiting for them. All in all, the distance was about 650 meters, about an 8-minute walk. And police are looking for 2 suspects for now, but they're not ruling out others. For example, there may have been an individual sitting in that getaway car waiting for them, but police aren't revealing details about that yet. There has been an outpouring of emotion following Nijjar's death, who was the president of the Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara. He was a high-profile individual in the community who advocated for a separate Punjabi state and was wanted in India in relation to terrorist activity in that country. He has never been charged with any crimes in Canada. With it, though, has come heightened interest in the motive for Nijjar's death, but homicide investigators would not give any details. Several journalists, including us at CBC, asked if investigators were speaking to other agencies like CSIS, Indian Intelligence, or RCMP about claims of threats to Nijjar's life.
Again, I can't say specifically what partners we have been working with, what evidence we've collected, but I can just tell you that we are open to any idea here, and we're certainly speaking with all of our partners.
Officers are now looking for dash cam or security footage, and anyone who's a potential witness is being asked to come forward. Leanne Young, CBC News, Surrey.
The trial of a man accused in the first-degree murder of a Burnaby teen was back in court today, with lawyers for the defense cross-examining an RCMP DNA expert. And a warning, some viewers may find the details disturbing. Ibraham Ali is accused of killing the 13-year-old girl in 2017. Today, his defense attorney questioned the credibility of Mountie search technologist Jeremy Finn, asking if he had tested any of the victim's clothing for sperm cells, if cross-contamination was possible, and the thoroughness of lab record keeping and reviews. The Crown has said DNA evidence will tie Ali to the crime, but a direct link has not yet been made to the jury. Well, today is National Indigenous Peoples Day, and it's being celebrated across the country. The day is designed to honor and celebrate the rich and varied tapestry of Indigenous culture. As Yasmin Gandam reports, more than 700 students and staff from 30 schools across the Vancouver School District gathered to mark the day.
Traditional music and chanting could be heard echoing through West Broadway in Vancouver. From a 30-foot teepee painted by an Indigenous artist to a long list of performers, songs, stories, and dances honoring Indigenous cultures from around the world. A hit for many young students in the audience.
Do you think you've learned about the Indigenous culture today?
They sing a lot of songs. Yeah, that was so good, and like a lot of drums.
You happy? The music, Indigenous culture wants you to have the feeling of happiness, I guess.
Educators in the Vancouver School District say it's crucial to incorporate Indigenous teachings directly from Indigenous peoples into the curriculum.
This is the generation of reconciliation, because these kids have had a chance to learn from Indigenous people their whole school lives. And I think it's really important as a non-Indigenous educator to be able to have the opportunity to learn from and for Indigenous communities.
The overall vibe today, one big party and joy from Indigenous performers and activists, as well as students from across the Lower Mainland.
It is really about conveying Indigenous brilliance and Indigenous joy. And what you see on the face of the students is joy when they're listening to the music. And learning about the local nations here, the Hamathwim, the Skohomish Alkameo, the Tsleil-Waututh people, and as well as other Indigenous nations from across Canada and around the world.
The event was held at the VSB Education Centre, situated on the ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
Sharing traditions, cultures, it's so critical for us at the Vancouver School Board. Our education plan has a foundational goal of really understanding and focusing on reconciliations.
A sentiment that these kids are taking in.
My favorite part is when the first 1 week arrived.
Yeah, the welcoming?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yes, what's been your favorite part?
The TP.
This is the 4th year the VSB has put it on, and they hope it will continue growing and evolving in years to come. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
National Indigenous Peoples Day celebrations are taking place across the province. Here's a live look at the festivities at the Bill Reid Millennium Amphitheatre in Surrey. And the event is hosted by the Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, and Katzie First Nations. The city of Surrey says it's an opportunity to acknowledge and show respect and admiration for Indigenous peoples past, present, and future. And in Prince George, the celebrations continued with live entertainment, cultural activities, and workshops, artisan goods, and food vendors as well. The gathering was hosted by the Claytlee Tene First Nation. And the Sawoot First Nation is the latest community to declare the creation of a new Indigenous protected and conserved area off the coast of Vancouver Island. The area is called Quant, and it means to be looking after. It will protect approximately 155 square kilometers of ocean at the eastern coast of the Saanich Peninsula.
We have a shortage of food fish, so this will enable us to have a nice, sustainable fishery for all the people in the community, so I can put food on everybody's table.
Since 2018, the federal government has committed more than $1.2 billion to Indigenous-led conservation efforts to fight climate change and acknowledge Indigenous rights. The Sawoot First Nation is developing a plan to manage the area, which focuses on education and data collection. Well, believe it or not, despite all the clouds, it is the summer solstice, which means it's the longest day of the year, a perfect day for the annual Go Skateboarding Day. Oh, that looked like it hurt. Hundreds of skateboarders have been dropping in and around Vancouver using the city landscape as their playground with some success, not so much there. Skaters started at the Plaza Skate Park with waffles. They cruised through town and are capping things off with a barbecue at Britannia Community Centre.
It means get out there with your friends, get on your wheels, be outside, and just be free.
Since I was like 12, I was always pushing around, and now since everybody's so stoked on it, taking it a bit more seriously.
Skateboarding is one thing that just brings everybody together. You look at this group of people from all over the world, all different walks of life, and we're all here for one reason, and it's to get stoked on other people skateboarding. It's the best community to be a part of. I think everybody should get a skateboard today.
Boarders say the warm weather is what makes Vancouver a great hub for the sport, but they say the copious amounts of rain have them advocating for an undercover skate park. Okay, it's time to bring in my trusty skateboarding partner, Johanna, because we look like skateboarders, right? Stop me when I get to the trick that is your specialty. Backside half cab. Fakie ollie? Ollie, okay.
That's the only one I could ever do. But yeah, I was a skater girl back in the day.
Okay.
Yeah. Literally, the ollie is the easiest one. It's just it's this one. So.
Okay, I have no idea, so thanks.
Thank you for not, getting it high up on the list so I could feel kind of cool. Cool was definitely the story today for the skateboarders in that gray weather you mentioned, Anita. We've got lots more sun ahead. But yeah, I love that recommendation. Everyone should get a skateboard and get stoked on skateboarding. We've got lots more outdoor weather ahead, but I've set the radar back to 6 hours ago. And yes, the showers, the gray skies. In fact, it sort of felt like one of our darkest starts in weeks, thanks to this swirling low just south of the border, bringing the thunderstorm activity through the spine of BC right now, basically through the South Peace region, Prince George right down to the Okanagan, seeing some scattered lightning strikes. And I did notice a little cell headed down towards Nanaimo, Parksville on the island as well. So it's an active evening in our longest day of the year, 16 hours and 15 minutes before that 9:15 sunset. Temperatures tomorrow will feel notably warmer. So we are getting into summer weather, which is a double-edged sword this time of the year. So Anita, I'll take you through a big warm-up and a return to the sunshine, but no ollies ahead.
Yeah, not in this condition, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Well, despite inflation, Canadians are still shopping and retail sales are on the rise. We break down the numbers after the break. Thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream tonight. Young people living with addictions in BC now have access to more treatment and recovery services. The province has added 24 new substance use treatment beds in Surrey and Vancouver. But as Yasmin Gandam reports, some are skeptical it will make much of a difference.
18 beds at the Phoenix Society in Surrey and 6 at the Covenant House in Vancouver. The new beds in Surrey will serve men from throughout the province between the ages of 17 and 24, while the 6 beds in Vancouver are open to young adults ages 16 to 24. A welcome addition, but some advocates say young women need more help too.
Difficult to be in that environment as a woman. I think there's such a need for women-only places that can just allow women to feel safe and secure no matter what's going on in their life.
Diversity, an organization in Surrey that provides support to marginalized communities, is concerned that these groups are being left out.
For racialized communities, that within their culture, like seeking even mental health services is not very common in their home country or not accessible in their home country. And so they come here and people talk about accessing mental health services, but then there's gates that prevent them from being able to do that.
Terrell adds that marginalized groups have unique needs and are often unable to seek supports because of that.
If English is not their first language and they go to a hospital seeking advice, but they can't speak English and can't communicate properly or can't advocate on their behalf, then how are they able to access the services that they require to be able to get help for substance use?
Guy Felicella, who works with the BC Centre of Substance Use, says youth also need more support after treatment.
The continuum to to move them forward. And you'd like to see some additional stuff being added in as well, with employment opportunities as well for youth or for anybody going into treatment, because that provides purpose for people.
Vancouver Coastal Health is accepting referrals from healthcare providers for the new beds. Services will begin by the end of June. Yasmin Gandim, CBC News, Vancouver.
Retail sales rose by 1.1% in April across Canada, coming in significantly higher than expectations. That's according to the latest data from Stats Canada. Retailers across the country raked in nearly $66 billion in April, up almost 3% from last year. Just about every type of store saw increased sales during the month, with food and beverage shops leading the way. Furniture, electronics, and appliance sales are the exceptions, with shrinking sales there. Provincially, BC saw a 0.5% increase. Retail expert David Ian Gray is live with us now. David is the strategist and the founder of Dig360 Consulting. David, retail sales rose 1.1% in April. They were only forecast to increase by about 0.2%. What's the significance of this?
Yeah, it's so funny the times we live in. If this was 4 years ago, we'd be really alarmed by how flat a growth curve that was. But we're in a year where we think that demand is really going to be dropping off. So the shock there was not that it was a big month for retail, but it wasn't a bad month for retail.
So is that spending, though, driven by volume, or does the fact that prices are so much higher now actually play into it? Like, are people buying the same amount of stuff, but it all just costs way more, so that's pushing these numbers up?
Well, I was digging into the numbers today, and it kind of varies by category. So we know a lot about the food story. We're seeing automotive starting to come back online, and the car companies are not giving us deals. But on the other hand, it was noted in the press release from SaskCan, general merchandise and secondarily clothing were significantly up. And that, if it's a clothing story, it's really because we didn't buy anything for 2 years. We're starting to replenish, but there's no inflation in clothing. In fact, if anything, things are kind of perpetually on sale. So it just depends on the category we're shopping, whether or not it's an inflation story. But certainly that is a big chunk of the portfolio of buying is where we're buying a fewer items, but we're having to spend more on them.
Let's talk about a little bit more about where we're spending. So you mentioned clothing there. You know, people didn't buy clothing for so long. Now they have to catch up on all the things they didn't buy. What about things like furniture and appliances not seeing an increase? Why is that?
Yeah, anything to do with the home has been really eroding through the latter half of last year and into this year. And I think part of that, it sounds a bit bleak, and they were actually some of the worst performing categories, including building supplies for renos and things like that. But they ran so hot 2020, 2021 that this is really just kind of a return to normal, if that makes sense. But for a given point in time, it's no fun if you're those types of retailers right now.
David, just quickly here, what kind of impact could the increase in retail sales actually have on the Bank of Canada's attempts to slow inflation?
Yeah, so they're very concerned. So the consumers right now are still demanding items, and that's the part that wasn't expected. So The pundits, including ourselves, are looking at the Bank of Canada to once again do a rate increase in July. And they're really concerned with the product price inflation. But as this comes into the consumers day to day and their credit card debt and their mortgages getting renewed, the game that's being played may run into a kind of a recession and a consumer-driven one. So we're really wary of where the fall looks and is going to take us.
David Ian Gray, Retail 360 Consulting. Thank you. Well, nearly 7 years after the Competition Bureau began investigating whether companies were fixing the price of bread, bakery giant Canada Bread today pleaded guilty for its role in the scheme and agreed to pay a $50 million fine. Nisha Patel has more on the settlement and consumers' discontent.
Canada Bread pleaded guilty in court and was fined after it admitted it worked with a rival to push up the cost of bread. The company, which makes brands like Dempster's, has been under investigation since 2016.
Obviously, it's been some time coming, but this is a very, very large investigation.
Matthew Boswell runs Canada's Competition Bureau. He says this is the largest price-fixing fine ever.
$50 million is a significant amount of money for most companies, and I think it should deter them.
Grocery giants Loblaw and George Weston admitted to playing a part in the scheme in 2017 and got immunity from prosecution. Now Canada Bread says one of its bosses discussed prices with an executive at Weston Foods, which resulted in price hikes in 2007 and 2011. Back then, it was owned by Maple Leaf Foods. Mexico's Grupo Bimbo bought Canada Bread in 2014.
It's really easy just to sort of blame it on the former regime and say, you know what, they were bad, we're not bad, we just want to get this behind us.
Other major players like Metro, Sobeys, Walmart Canada, Giant Tiger, and Maple Leaf Foods are still under investigation. They maintain they haven't done anything wrong, though this latest development could prompt others to come forward.
This is a significant fine. This is a second player. And now you really do have a conspiracy.
This case hits home for shoppers who buy bread weekly. It may be tough to regain their trust.
They need to be held account for it, right?
Did anybody go to jail?
No.
Horrible.
We got to stop big business from trying to gouge every penny they can out of us.
These revelations come with grocers already under huge scrutiny over soaring food prices. And while Canada Bread will pay the $50 million fine to the federal government, it and other major players are also named in 2 class action lawsuits. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
A submarine bound for the wreckage of the Titanic is still missing tonight amid concerns that those on board could be running out of oxygen. More on the search in the North Atlantic next.
Ah, the beach. The hustle of the city seems so far away. Here you can enjoy the sound of the waves, watch the feathered bombers, dream your dreams, celebrate nature. For some, especially at Kitts Beach, the celebration demands music.
Summer's here, I'm for that. I got my rubber sand, I've got my straw hat, I got my cold beer, I'm just glad that it's here.
Thanks to the wonders of technology, we can all twitch to a different drummer these days without bothering anyone else. Headphones help us create our own soundscapes. But alas, some people want to share their music with everyone else. A lot of people these days carry big, high-powered radios and stereos to the beach. They're called blasters, and they literally blast the music all over the beach. Of course, there are differing points of view about all this free music on the beach. For some, it's simply a sociable part of the scene. For others, it's a nuisance, noise pollution. Why would you have speakers rather than just use your headphones? Well, that way everybody can hear it.
And here I can talk with my friends, right? And I can still listen to the music at the same time, right?
I think there should be a law against it.
I think it's not really nice if you've come to a place for peace and quiet and about 1 block away you can hear loud music that you don't want to hear. So I think they should have respect for other people and just keep it low.
Does anyone ever come up to you and say, hey, that's too loud, will you turn it down?
Not yet. I've seen a couple of old people, get up and move away. I don't know whether it's because of the music or what, but no one said anything to me, so.
Okay, so what would you say if they did say turn it down?
Bye.
It's not bad if they're all on the same station, but when they're all on different stations, you get a headache. Like you hear one out of one ear and one out of the other, and it sort of mixes up in between.
What really kills me are the ghetto blasters on the windsurfers out there. When there's no wind, they just hold them up to the sail and away they go.
It's my favorite time of the year, and I'm glad that it's here. Yeah.
The desperate search for 5 people aboard a missing submarine in the deep North Atlantic is only intensifying tonight amid concerns that the vessel is poised to run out of oxygen. There were high hopes this morning after teams heard tapping under the ocean. Here's Kayla Hounsell with the latest on the rescue effort.
A Canadian Aurora patrol plane searching from above, dropping sonars to listen below, after another Canadian aircraft detected underwater noises.
With respect to the noises specifically, we don't know what they are.
But searchers do think the sounds are man-made, providing some hope, though time is rapidly running out.
The noises have been described as banging noises.
The Canadian Coast Guard ship Terry Fox pulling out to join other Canadian vessels in the multinational effort to save the 5 people lost in the North Atlantic. They were on board a submersible heading to the wreck of the Titanic. American aircraft have arrived carrying heavy equipment, including remotely operated vehicles used to search the depths. Then loaded onto the Horizon Arctic, considered one of the most powerful offshore support vessels in the world. Now on its way to the search site, 685 kilometers southeast of Newfoundland.
I've been in the marine industry since a very young age and seen a lot of different situations, and I've never seen equipment of that nature move that quickly.
Horizon Maritime owns the Polar Prince, which launched the Titan around 8 o'clock Sunday morning, before losing contact an hour and 45 minutes later.
The marine industry in this region is no stranger to responding to difficult incidents.
As specialized equipment floods in from around the world, so too has the world's media, making the small, scenic city of St. John's the center of global attention. OceanGate, the company that owns the Titan, estimates air will run out Thursday morning.
It's a terrible thought to know I have actual friends there, people I've met.
New York writer Mike Reese made the trip himself.
If they're stranded, if their air is running out, I know there's going to be calm there and resignation to it all and acceptance of it all.
He says he would do it again if the 5 on board are rescued.
Kayla Hounsell reporting from St. John's tonight. Now, the Titan submersible has been taking people down to the Titanic wreck for years, but as Thomas Douglas shows us, there have been questions about just how safe it really is and whether the concerns are being taken seriously enough.
Here's how the adventure was supposed to end. The crew opening the Titan's sealed dome, the way OceanGate showed in this video for would-be clients.
Good trip, gentlemen. How are you doing? Hey.
What the company didn't publicize were the concerns highlighted in a letter from an industry committee in 2018, warning the current experimental approach adopted by OceanGate could result in negative outcomes from minor to catastrophic.
There's just no oversight, and then nobody really knows what's in the box.
William Conan says OceanGate operated in international waters since neither the U.S. or Canadian Coast Guard would have allowed Titan to dive without formal classification.
Sometimes that's an economic decision because classing is, it involves lots more money, lots more time.
OceanGate, based in Washington state, never sought the external certification that would have required rigorous safety testing. CEO Stockton Rush, who's now among the missing, once told a crowd there was no need for third-party certification because Titan wasn't made of traditional material.
These programs are over the top in their rules and regulations, but they had nothing with carbon fiber.
And while Rush boasted about the sub's novel controller,
I can hand it to anybody.
Some weren't sold on it.
You can question a PlayStation remote as the main piloting tool, with that and an iPad.
Others wondered about a deep sea excursion this time of year.
It's really early in the season, so I'm not sure, why OceanGate went out this soon.
Then there's that lawsuit settled out of court after a staff member warned of potential extreme danger to passengers. With so few answers about what happened, there's no telling whether past warnings predicted a disaster. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Quebec police officials say they've made progress in the fight against so-called ghost guns, or guns made using 3D printers that can't be traced. As Jennifer Yoon tells us, RCMP are sharing their progress on cracking down across the country.
Police say they've seized 440 arms. In total, 71 of them were firearms that were printed in 3D printers like this. Now, this is one of the 3D printed firearms that they seized yesterday. You can tell that it's 3D printed because of the grainy texture. I don't know if you can see that. And also because there's no serial number. And as you can imagine, that makes it really difficult for authorities to track these ghost guns. Take a listen to the RCMP.
The practice put in place of a collaboration on this type of criminal phenomenon also now gives us the flexibility and the agility to do it again with much more rigor and agility.
The operation was conducted across 8 provinces, including Quebec, Ontario, and British Columbia. Police say it started with a tip from the Canadian Border Services Agency about a supplier in Quebec who allegedly was importing and reselling some of the parts needed to build a working ghost gun.
It's an outstanding operation.
This retired Montreal police detective says it's hard to measure just how widespread ghost guns are, and police will have to continue cracking down.
Emptiness never lives very long in the criminal world, so the demand is very high. So what we're going to see probably in the next few days or weeks or months, we're going to see somebody else trying to jump in and do the same kind of business.
These ghost guns have become more and more widespread across Canada in places like Calgary and Ontario, here in Quebec as well. And authorities say that they're trying to get ahead of the problem, not stay behind it. And this investigation, which started in November of last year, is one step that takes them closer to that goal. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Montreal.
Fighting illness, discrimination, and working to preserve their culture. This Alakwalams couple shares some of the challenges and happy memories they've experienced over their 70-year marriage.
One of the key things is to make sure that anything flammable is placed at least 10 meters away from the home. So that could be things like wood piles, sheds, recreational vehicles, or just any old construction material that's lying around. Wooden fences can bring a fire from the forest edge right up to the home. And so metal fences might be a better option for that. Wooden decks can also pose a hazard with embers and flames, so experts say fire-resistant materials are available, or you could just opt for a stone or cement patio instead. Think about the foliage around your property as well. Evergreen trees, conifers with cones and needles can become fuel for a fire, much more so than deciduous trees with leaves. And think about the gardens right around your house as well. Woody shrubs like cedars and junipers can ignite. Same with wood mulch.
Fire safety experts say you should have non-combustible materials for the first 1.5 meters surrounding your home. So that could be things like pea gravel or brick or concrete.
If you live right at the edge of a wooded area, there are some things that you can do to reduce the intensity of a fire at the forest edge. One of them is to increase the distance between trees, clear up any brush piles or fallen trees, and make sure that the bottom 2 meters of the trees are cleared of branches. You also want to think about what the house itself is made of. There's an idea out there that metal roofs are better than asphalt shingles for fire safety, but the experts I spoke with said as long as it has that Class A rating, it doesn't matter. Siding is another thing to consider. A lot of homes in Nova Scotia have wood shingles, which are obviously combustible. Vinyl basically melts if it gets too hot and then exposes those underlying layers to flames and embers. Fire safety experts say your best options for siding are metal, brick, heavy logs, and cement fiberboard.
There's also home maintenance to keep in mind. Make sure that the gutters are clear of dried old leaves and material that could ignite. And if you've got a lawn, get that lawnmower out once in a while and keep the grass trimmed. The fire safety experts I talked to said even if you do all of this, there's no guarantee that your house will be protected. Wildfires are unpredictable, but if you tackle some of these things beforehand, you've got a much better chance of protecting your home. Frances Willick, CBC News, Halifax.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
The Canadian women's soccer team wants to settle the issue of remuneration with Soccer Canada before the World Cup. And they'll have to do it soon because the World Cup is next month. As Lindsay Duncombe tells us, it's just one of the challenges for the team as they prepare for the first kick.
Canada hopes these first drills could be building blocks to World Cup victory.
I think just to make sure that, we're hitting the ground running, we have to make sure that we're practicing all these little nuances to make sure that we're the team that's hoisting that trophy at the end of the tournament.
Julia Grosso from Vancouver.
Canada is the 7th-ranked team in the world and reigning Olympic champions, but players expect a long, tough fight.
We've seen a lot of wins recently from Canadian players who play in Europe in particular, so they're coming in hot from those leagues, so it'll be really good to see.
Canada has talent. Julia Grosso named the best midfielder in the Italian League. Kaylin Sheridan, the best goalkeeper in the American National Women's Soccer League, led, of course, by Christine Sinclair, who has scored more international goals than any other soccer player on earth.
With goal number 185.
But the team faces a formidable group stage, including a match against home team Australia and superstar striker Sam Kerr. Outside the group, the American squad is ranked number 1 and no doubt bent on revenge after Canada crushed USA's dreams of Olympic gold. There's fighting off the pitch, too. In an interview with the Canadian press, Captain Christine Sinclair said outstanding issues with Canada soccer need to be settled fast. We're not at a point where we're not getting on a plane, but time's coming where we want it done, she said.
They're still waiting to hear about funding and equal pay, but they've also haven't been given a send-off game. So I think overall, the Canadian soccer has let them down.
That criticism comes as a recent study reveals a lot of countries may be letting their women footballers down. It found just 40% of participants in the World Cup consider themselves professional, as in they get paid to play. And 66% say they had to take time off of another job to play in the World Cup. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Checking in now again with meteorologist Johanna Wagstaff. Joe, I know it's summer solstice. We're supposed to be out all day into the night, but it's not nice out.
I know, it's not giving solstice vibes today. Yeah, I agree with you on that front. Cool, cloudy, showery for most of the day. I think I see a hint of blue sky as we head into the last few hours, although sunset's still 9:15, so there is still time to get your solstice on. 19 right now at YVR. Temperatures a couple degrees cooler than our seasonal, which for this time of the year across Metro Vancouver, sort of low 20s. And I wanted to show you the live radar and lightning. We are seeing a lot of activity right across the spine. Kamloops just had a good thunderstorm, seeing that down through the South Okanagan. And that little cell I'm keeping my eye on headed towards Port Alberni. Wish we had more rain for the island, of course, for the wildfire. But that rain has been good news for dropping wildfire danger rating in the southeast. All these greens and blues, that means low chance of new fires starting and spreading. Seeing that build up, though, in the northeast, and we will see the reversal of this very quickly as we head into early next week because our underlying soil is still very dry despite all the rain. We are going to get a bit more over the next couple of days for the interior. That's it for Metro Vancouver, I think, and for the south coast, the showers we saw today. But this swirling system bringing maybe 10 more millimeters, those darker greens, to parts of the interior before we see things clear out on Friday. So a couple more showery days for parts of BC. But again, the sunshine will really be the story tomorrow across the south coast. Watch these afternoon highs as I take you through Thursday and Friday. Starting to see the mid-20s for the interior Thursday. By Friday, high 20s. Coming down a little bit for Saturday and then heating back up Sunday. By early next week, we'll be hitting the 30s for the interior and feeling like high 20s for Metro Vancouver. Headed into another warm and dry and long stretch for much of the province. 22 tomorrow and through Williams Lake, 24 up towards Prince George, so starting to feel those 20s build back in. Tomorrow will really feel like a turning point for much of the province. And certainly for Metro Vancouver, look at this, 7-day forecast. Don't have any rain for us. One rogue model is giving a few showers Saturday morning, but at this point, everything looking dry as that ridge of high pressure builds back in. And Anita, by early next week, we'll be talking 27s, 28s inland. That's solstice weather.
That is solstice weather. Love it. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
An important part of National Indigenous Peoples Day is simply listening to the stories and experiences of Indigenous people. Rudy Kelly, host of the new CBC podcast, The Herb Original, spoke with an elder couple from the Lakwalams Nation about their childhoods growing up on the BC coast, a harrowing battle with tuberculosis, and their love story spanning 70 years. Take a look at the first half of Love Knows No Tribe.
Hi, I'm Rudy Kelly, the subject and co-creator of the new CBC podcast, The Herb Original. Today, we're going to be hearing the incredible story of survival of my lifelong friends, Leonard and Mona Alexey, who've been married for over 70 years after meeting in the infamous Miller Bay Hospital. They now reside in their home village, Lakwalams.
So as a child, I grew up in a camp setting, like wilderness, with animals and salmon and trapping. That was our lifestyle in those days for survival. And we'll come here in the wintertime, spend a few months in Lakwalams. And Shirley was the first one. Your mom was a good friend of ours. And to me and my cousins, It was a lovely life. It was freedom. And then for some reason, my Aunt Peggy was in Port Edward. They had work going there. So my parents took us over to visit. And I often wonder why, but they didn't return to Loch Lambs. They just got employment at Port Ed. It was a beautiful community because from all over the districts, all over the areas, up and down the coast, it seemed like they all come to Port Ed for employment. And there's one happy community. Everybody knew everybody, although you're from different communities. It was just a friendly place. It was so good. And this was right after the war.
What was your first reaction, if you could tell us about that, when you went and saw a cannery for the first time?
For myself, because of the way I grew up. I was more or less out there in the wilderness with the animals and everything. To work in a cannery, it was so amazing. It was so loud, and a different smell there, and not fresh air like I grew up. It was like a circus. It was just music, the cans coming, the music, and the motors going.
The living conditions there, certainly when Irwin took me out for a tour, because Irwin was the one who really remembered Port Ed a lot, and he told me about how they lived on a dock in a small shack that all of them had to sleep in, and they had to go out to get water, a bucket of water and that. Could you tell me about your experience? Was it similar to that?
Well, where we lived, my mom and dad, my sister Betty, my brother Herbie, myself. There's 5 of us. They had those little rooms, a 1-bedroom shack, I guess you'd call cannery row house. It was very crowded. It was very cold over the water. It was very damp. And our facilities were outdoors. And that's cold. Cannery row was meant just for summertime. But there's employment sometimes during the winter. It was not built for that. And it's awfully cold. I know Leonard's worked there a few winters. It was very hard for our native people. I find it hard because it was, there was a lot of discrimination, even that late in my lifetime, which was more in my parents' time.
Now you got sick too, right, when you were
Yeah, I got sick in Port Ed.
Tell us about that, about how you got sick. And
This was about the time when there was so much tuberculosis breakout. And I ended up in Miller Bay Hospital. They didn't give me much hope. I was there for 3 years, and each year when you get a treatment, it would last a year. It was experimental treatments for Native people, but I find that the treatments there are very harsh. I know I used to cry every week when I get that's when they collapse your lung and they put a needle in your tummy without freezing it.
Did they tell you why they collapsed you?
They pumped the air in there. The needles were not fine. They had the air, oxygen had to go through that, which is not, other people don't suffer as much as I did. But there was some something in there that stopped a needle, and they did ram it in there. And that's why I used to cry.
She had a hole in her lung the size of a 50-cent piece. That's why they had to collapse it to rest her lungs. She couldn't do anything. She couldn't comb her hair.
Yeah, that's the
brush her
first year.
teeth, nothing.
First year, you just lay flat on your back. Couldn't comb your hair, couldn't wash your face. Everybody has to do it for you, to show you're still and your lungs are not exerting itself. And then the second year, I got injection twice a day for a whole year. And my rear end. It got to the point where I couldn't walk very much. The third year, I figured I was going home the second year. But the third year, they came back for the same treatment, twice a day. And this time I really cried because that hurts.
And then, all of a sudden, that guy shows up at some point?
That's where I met this guy. They had a visiting, the patients visit just on Christmas.
Oh, okay.
So I met him for 5 minutes. Then they sent him to residential school the next day. To him, that was the beginning. To me, that was the end.
What was your first impression of Leonard?
I didn't know him. I didn't know him. I know he was from Loch Alliance, but I never met him. I knew him as a child, but then we went different ways.
Leonard's mother had passed away giving birth to him, so he ended up moving in with his aunt who lived in King Colas, in the Nass.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he lived in King Colas for 7 years, and he only knew how to speak Nishka. And then his aunt's husband had passed away, and they had to move back from King Colas to Loch Lambs. So then he had a harsh life here in Loch Lambs for the next 3 years, and then he ran away to Port Edward to be with his brother and his father. He found out his father was alive, so he moved in with them in Port Edward. And then him and his brother heard there was a new thing out called Family Allowance, and so they wanted to get their share because it was meant for kids. And they both, Uncle Johnny and Leonard, both walked from Port Edward to Prince Rupert to the government office to collect their money. And that's where the Indian agent found Dad. And that's when they sent him to Port Alberni at the age of 9 or 10. And he stayed there for the next 7 years. While he was in Port Alberni, his father had died of TB, so he became an orphan then. So they kept him there. They didn't send him home.
Oh, that's why the 7 years.
Yeah, and they did finally send him to Miller Bay because he contacted TB in Port Alberni Residential School. So they sent him back to Miller Bay, and that's where he first saw my mother. And if you remember, my mother was lying in bed for a whole year. She couldn't move. She couldn't do anything. And so my mother was trying to discourage my father. Find somebody else.
What did you say? How were you trying to discourage him?
Well, he was in Alberni at this time, and he wrote letters. And you couldn't see, he couldn't read these letters. But it took me a while to read it. And that's after he came back from school. I was still in a hospital. I didn't know how long I'd be there. That I don't know if I'll ever get home. I had no idea if I would. So 3 years, Nah, go on, go. But he didn't listen. In the meantime, I got to like him. He was very friendly, and he was easy, happy-go-lucky guy. But I didn't have my hopes up too high because, like I said, I didn't know if I was ever coming home.
We'll hear the rest of Mona and Leonard's story tomorrow, including Leonard's experience in residential school and how the couple chose to preserve their culture for their children. You can hear more from Rudy Kelly on the Aboriginals podcast, available on the CBC Listen app. A bit of pain and maybe some possible gains for a local rescue operation. After the break, we'll show you the group of hikers doing something, well, frankly, really hard since early this morning.
As one of the first to mark National Indigenous Peoples Day, Newfoundlanders welcomed it with smudging and drumming.
The Inuit drum is also the heartbeat of all creation, and we want to remember that as well.
In Canada's largest city, the day began with a sunrise ceremony, marking both Indigenous Peoples Day and the summer solstice.
One day when it's the longest day that we give the thanks all day long.
As the sun continued to rise across the country, so did this flag in the nation's capital. Indigenous elders and the Prime Minister together honoring and remembering residential school survivors.
For me personally, the raising of this flag is the raise of the spirits. The spirits of the Métis children and the First Nation children and the Inuit children that never came home.
It has taken many years for Canada to acknowledge these truths. And it is due to the courage and determination of survivors.
Remembering the resilience of Indigenous peoples, the Prime Minister also said today is a day for joy.
Last year, one of the requests made to me was to make sure that we changed this flag at the turning of every season. So we gather here at the solstice to refresh, to remember, to recommit ourselves to the hard work of reconciliation.
Elsewhere, several received Canada's highest honor. The Order of Canada was awarded to Indigenous recipients and others who supported reconciliation. Among them, the first Indigenous female MP, Ethel Jean Blondin Andrew. Across the country, celebrations continued as both Indigenous and non-Indigenous people
now we're going to spread the canvas.
Pledged to do the hard work of reconciliation. David Thurton, CBC News, Ottawa.
Land Back is a CBC original podcast where we uncover land theft in Canada and look at how Indigenous people are taking it all back. Land Back is out now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC Vancouver is the premier media partner of the 2023 Surrey Fusion Festival, July 22nd and 23rd. Visit the festive cultural pavilions, enjoy free live music and family activities. And the 13th annual Indian Summer Festival takes place July 6th to the 16th. The festival's powerful 10-event lineup speaks to the theme of interdependence. Tickets at indiansummerfest.ca.
It's a feat of endurance involving one of the Lower Mainland's hardest hikes. 80 people have spent the day pushing through the pain in an attempt to complete the grouse grind as many times as possible. And the challenge started when the gates opened at 4 a.m. today, with many hikers completing the course several times before our cameras arrived.
Doing the grouse grind really is a mental challenge as well as a physical challenge. I'm really in awe of all the participants today who have managed to do it even more than once. It is a great achievement.
This is the first time the multi-grouse grind challenge has been run since 2019. As well as their registration fee, participants must raise a minimum $100 donation for North Shore Rescue. All of them hope to complete the grind at least 19 times before gates close at 10 p.m. tonight. Well, if you haven't had a chance to do the grind even once, I can't say that I recommend it. It is not an easy hike. So kudos to these people for doing it 19 times. That is absolutely incredible. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. We just remind you, if you're not already watching us on CBC Gem, you can do that. It's our free app.